In this lesson, we will talk about lines, their slopes, and their equations. To solve the following few questions, you will need to know these two formulas. The first one is the slope formula that allows you to find the slope of a line when you're given 2 points. And finally, the slope-intercept form of a line y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. Slope is a number that shows the incline of the line. Slopes can be positive, negative, zero, or undefined. Horizontal lines, those that go straight from left to right, have zero slopes. Vertical lines, those that go straight up and down, have undefined slopes. Lines that are increasing have positive slopes. Finally, decreasing lines have negative slopes. Let's now look at a few examples. Here, this question is asking you to classify the slope of each line based on the direction of the line as either positive, negative, zero, or undefined. So let's look at this first line. This is a horizontal line, and we know that slopes of horizontal lines are always zero. This line here, if you look at it, and remember, we're always looking at the line starting on the left and going to the right. To determine if the slope is positive or negative, you have to analyze the direction from left to right. If the line goes up, the slope is positive. And then this line here, if you look at it from left to right, this line goes down, meaning it's descending or decreasing. So the slope is negative. Now, sometimes a question may ask you to determine the slope of a vertical line, and just keep in mind the horizontal line, the flat line here, the slope is 0, and for the vertical line, this one here, the slope is undefined. This question is not actually just asking you to determine the sign of the slope, but it also asks you for the number that that slope will be. So first of all, remember that the line, if you look at it from left to right, is going up. It's rising or increasing. This means the slope will be positive. Now the slope is nothing but the distance between the 2 points, any 2 points on the line, and these 2 points are given to you vertically, so the distance between the 2 points vertically versus the distance between these 2 points horizontally. So how many units is in between this point and this point vertically? You just count the number of units. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the vertical distance between these 2 points is 4. Now let's look at the horizontal distance. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is 5 units horizontally. So if you were to give the number for this line's slope, you would say 4, remember the vertical distance, over 5, the horizontal distance. 4 over 5, positive. Now, this question here is basically the same question, but it will ask you to give the slope of a line that's not graphed. And instead of giving the 2 points on the graph, it will give you the coordinates of 2 points. And here is how you solve this question. Remember these two formulas that I gave you in the beginning of this lecture? For this question, I will be using the first one of the two, that's called the slope formula. So the 2 points that were given to us by the question had coordinates -3, -8, and 4, 6. The formula that we will use to find the slope if you're given 2 points on the line is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So where to find these values, y2 and y1, x2 and x1? So -8 here is the y-coordinate of the first point, so that's y1. And this 6 here is the y2, that's the y-coordinate of the second point, -3 is x1, and 4 is x2. So now I'll be plugging these values into our slope formula. So why does 8 have two negatives in front of it, and why does 3 have two negatives in front of it? Well, if you analyze the formula, inside of the formula, y1 actually has a negative in front of it, and x1 has a negative in front of it, so those negatives went into the formula. Now the 8 and the 3 both also had a negative in front of them, so we had to keep those negatives also. That's why in front of 8 and in front of 3 in the formula you have two negatives. Having those two negatives will actually turn the sign in front of 8 into a plus and the sign in front of 3 into a plus. Well, let's compute the result. So at the top of our fraction, we're going to have 6 plus 8, and at the bottom it's 4 plus 3. So at the top it's 14, and at the bottom is 7, which means the answer is 2. Here is asking you to find the slope and the y-intercept of the line, but you're not given the graph and you're not given 2 points to use the slope formula. You're given an equation of a line in slope-intercept form. Let's now again refer to the two formulas I gave you in the beginning. Now we're going to look at the second one, the slope-intercept equation of a line. This formula here, y equals mx plus b. M is the slope and b is the y-intercept. Let's compare this formula with the equation that's given to you in this question. In this equation, the number that's next to x is the slope. The number that's by itself is the y-intercept. When answering this question, you should say my slope m is 5 over 2. It's a positive slope, meaning the line will be going up from left to right, and my y-intercept is negative 2/3. What this means is that the line would cross y-axis at negative 2/3. Slopes can also help us identify parallel and perpendicular lines. Remember, parallel lines are the lines that will never intersect. The example of parallel lines can be railroad tracks. Perpendicular lines are the lines that do cross, and when they cross, they form a 90-degree angle. Parallel lines have identical slopes. So if a slope of one line is, for example, 1/2, then parallel line to that line will also have a slope of 1/2. Perpendicular lines have slopes that are opposite reciprocals of each other. This means that if one slope is 1/2, then the line that's perpendicular to it will have slope of -2. Negative because you have to change the sign, and 2 because you have to flip 1/2. To determine if any of these three lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither, we need to know their slopes. And remember, the slope m is hidden by the x inside of the slope-intercept equation of a line. Recall the second formula right here. The nice thing about the first line and the third line that are given to you in this question is that they are in the slope-intercept form. What it means is the slope is right by the x. So the slope of the first line is 2, and the slope of the third line is also 2. Because line number 2 was not in slope-intercept form, in other words, y was not by itself, we have to first change it into the slope-intercept form, meaning get y by itself, to find the slope. To get y by itself, I have to get rid of the 6x and also -3. To get rid of the 6x, I'm going to move it to the side and make it -6x, which results in -3y equals -6 minus 6x. To get rid of the -3, I will divide all terms by it. Here, also divide -6 by -3 and another -6 by -3. This gives me y equals 2 plus 2x. So the slope of this line is 2 because when y is by itself, the slope is right next to x. Going back to the original question, now we determined that the slope of the second line is also 2. So the conclusion we can make here is that all three lines are parallel because they have the same slopes. The last question will be solved using this formula that's called the point-slope form. So let's look at this question that will ask you to write an equation of the line that passes through a point 9, 6 and has a slope of negative 4/3. This question will ask you to give the answer in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. And you even are given a slope m of negative 4/3, so you are allowed to plug it in here. However, you're not provided with the y-intercept b. To solve this problem, we will be using the point-slope formula. Remember, the point-slope formula is y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. In this formula, y and x will stay as y and x. The m is your slope that's given. And then finally, your y1 and the x1 are the coordinates of the point that's given. So this x1 is 6, this y1 is 9, and your slope m is negative 4/3. Let's plug these numbers into the formula, and here's what we have. The next step is to distribute negative 4/3 into this binomial. So y minus 9 stays as is, and on the right side I have negative 4/3 x plus 24/3. Notice that 24/3 is just an 8. So the equation is y minus 9 equals negative 4/3 x plus 8. Because the question asked us to write the equation in slope-intercept form, it means we need to get y by itself. To get it by itself, I will take negative 9 and add it to this side. So here's my final answer. Y equals negative 4/3 x plus 17. In this equation, negative 4/3 x is your slope because it's right by the x, and 17 is your y-intercept.